Welcome to the Sisterhood in Politics podcast, a flagship podcast of the Consortium for Intersectional Justice. My name is Chamendra Veeravardhana, and it's a great pleasure to host you. Today on Sisterhood in Politics, we have a very special guest from Aotearoa. Em-Haley Kukutai Walker is a young leader advocating for Tino Rangatiratanga. She's a very talented musician and also a very gifted academic in the making. And Em-Haley, it's a great pleasure to have you here with us today. Tēnā koe, and you're very welcome to Sisterhood in Politics.
Oh, e mihi ana ki a koe, Chamindra. I'm so thrilled to be here as well. Once again, thank you for your support of my people and of myself and my mahi. It's a huge blessing to represent my ancestors and be here.
Oh, it's a great pleasure, and your mahi is absolutely beautiful, and I'm sure the world had the opportunity to witness the power of your mahi when you spoke at the United Nations recently, and we will come to your ongoing work at the United Nations and your international engagements in a minute. Em-Haley, it's a great pleasure to have you with us today. So let's start with a little bit of whakapapa, as it is customary in the Maori world. So can you tell us a bit about your community, your marae, and the kind of background that made you you, and where you grew up, and so on, and also a word about your tupuna?
Of course. I love that you acknowledged our traditional way of introducing ourselves. So I shall share with you my pepeha, and then I'll do a translation to English so that everyone may understand. Can't wait. Pai marere he uri ahau no Waikato tani wharau, ko taupiri te maunga, ko Waikato te awa, ko Ngāti Sipa te hapu, ko Tauranga nui te marae, ko kukutai, ko karaka ngōku whānau, ko Em-Haley Kukutai Walker tōku ingoa. E mihi ana, e mihi ana, e mihi ana kia koutou katoa. That means goodness and peace to you all. I am a proud grandchild of the Ngāti Sipa peoples from the Waikato Tainui Māori Tribal Confederation of Aotearoa, New Zealand. Taupiri is the name of my sacred mountain, and that is where my ancestors and where our kings have been laid to rest for over 200 years. Waikato was the name of my beautiful sacred ancestral river. Tauranga Nui is the name of my marae, which is like our ancestral gathering place with a beautifully ornate carved house, and where my great-grandmother, Nanny Mete Karaka Kukutai, lived and raised her daughter, my kuikui, my grandmother, Rangirara. And my family names and groups are Karaka and Kukutai, and my name is Em-Haley Kukutai Walker.
Oh, bless. Thank you very much for those words. And when you said Tauranga Nui Marae, can you tell us something about the relationship between Tauranga Nui Marae and Tauranga Waiwai Marae, the marae of the royals?
Yes, of course, yes. Tauranga Nui Marae, this is, again, our whare nui, or the carved ancestral house, where I'm from, it's called Te Puaha Waikato, which is like the river delta of Waikato. It's kind of maybe about 15 minutes drive from where our ancestral river Waikato meets the Tasman Sea. And so our wharenui sits only about 20 metres, if that, from the banks of the Waikato River. And our carved meeting house, our whare tupuna or wharenui, has been in place for 205 years. Previous to that, if I show you a picture of my pa, it was just up on the hill where at the moment is Te Huinga, which is like our beautiful accommodation for our ruruhi and koroua, for our elders, where they may remain in close proximity to our wharenui. And the relationship between Tauranga Nui and Tūranga Waiwai in Ngāru Wāhia, which is like the centre of the world for our Māori monarchy, is a close one for myself. My great-grandmother, Nanny Mete, Karaka Kukutai, whom I reference a lot in my work and is just a huge inspiration for me as a wahine, her work, her life's work really was serving her beloved kingitanga and her queen, Te Aotearangi Kahu. And so she helped establish Te Reo Māori under the korowai of Princess Te Puea. And she did this through well, she was an avid and renowned fisherwoman, fishing until her dying days, until about 2 weeks before her death in Waikato. And mata mata is our dialectual version of whitebait, otherwise known as inanga, and it's commonly known as white gold, a very, very valuable fish. And so my great-grandmother composed a song as well called Ngā Moni Ika, and Ngā Moni Ika was, it means fish money, money for fish. And so under Te Puea, to help fundraise for the building of Tūranga Waiwai as the centre of Te Kingitanga, Nanny Mete made Ngā Moni Ika by selling whitebait and of course tuna, the bounty of fish from our tribal area. And in addition to that, she was one of the founding members of Te Paua Mangatawhiri, which is the like traditional Māori performing arts kapahaka group that Princess Te Puea established as like a touring party and another way to fundraise for the building of Tūranga Waiwai. So, and then she physically helped build it as well. So there are very, very close ties, and beautifully, obviously she was, as I've mentioned, the lady in waiting for our first Māori queen, Te Arikinui Te Aotearangi Kahu. And so it was common knowledge and still is spoken about to this day that she was called the lady, that the lady would come and you'd never know when she was going to pop in for a cup of tea at my great-grandmother's whare at her house, which was right beside Tauranga Nui. So there are many close ties from Tauranga Nui and Tūranga Waiwai.
Oh, bless. Very good. And so thank you for that reply, Em-Haley. Tell us a bit more about your great-grandmother, Mete Karaka Kukutai. She was also known as the fearless dragon of Waikato, right?
Yes, that's correct. Te Taniwha Waikato. It is on her gravestone. It is the title of her memoir, which resides in many esteemed libraries around the country. And this was, this name was a tribute really to her power and her influence and the reverence that my people and my iwi still hold for her. Her influence is long-standing, and I am so proud to walk in her footsteps. There are many stories that I've grown up with from my beloved grandmother, my Kuikui Rangirara, her daughter, and there are many things that, every time I go back home for meetings, for whatever it may be, I will have cues of our nannies and my aunties coming up to tell me their memories of Nanny Mete, which is so precious, and I gather them all, whether in my mind or my heart, and she's a huge inspiration. Some things about her that I love, there are just so many, so may I list just a few. Of course, she was, in my opinion, the tauira, the absolute example of, how our tupuna wahine, our female ancestresses, were in pre-colonial times, before the patriarchal norms of Victorian society, and attitudes took hold. And so she was a composer, a performer, again, the lady in waiting for our queen, Te Aotearangi Kahu, and she was, a strong Indigenous female theorist, where she's quoted in a lot of official kingitanga documents in terms of her relationship with Te Reo Waikato, our ancestral river, as a fisherwoman. She was a high priestess of our Kingitanga specific faith, Tariao, which means morning star. So it was my great-grandmother who was a Tariao wahine, or a female pohunga, if you will, conducting the karakia and incantations for our ceremonies, for my people. She refused to speak English, which I just love so much. She refused to speak tū Pākehā. She traveled alongside Te Ariki Nui to Hawaii and throughout the Pacific, teaching haka, supporting the works of Te Ariki Nui, and her songs live on to this very day. I hear them in the most unlikely of places. I was at a garage party in Te Waipounamu in the South Island, whereas I whakapapa too, and I'm from the Waikato in the North Island. Beautifully, she is, I guess her songs carry her presence throughout all of our rituals. There is a Waikato and Waikato Tainui specific tradition of pokai, which is like the yearly touring of the kingitanga, whatever monarch is in charge, to various kingitanga supporting marae of my iwi and of other iwi, that was initially established as a way to benefit the widowed, the destitute, and to, bring hope and a very personal connection from the monarchy to our tribes. And so it is, of course, in our ritual, it is traditional that after the kaiwhai kōrero, or the speaker, has spoken, there must be a waiata tautoko, a song of support to, stand alongside what has just been said. And so, of course, when we have our pokai, we've got our haukainga, or our people, our home people, and then we've got the kingitanga that comes along as well. And I've been at pokai and just beamed with pride, where the waiata tautoko, the song of support that's chosen from both sides, is indeed Kiwiweka, the most famous composition of my great-grandmother, just interpreted in different ways. It is very, very beautiful, and a ever-present reminder of her influence, because the song itself is somewhat of an anti-war song, seeing as our people were, told very strongly under Te Puia not to conscript to a war that wasn't ours. Nevertheless, the war still kind of came to our area through the presence of ngā hui Americana, or American soldiers who were stationed in the port before their deployment. And so therefore there were children, my auntie Tangiwai Rewi being the child of one of these children that arose from American soldiers and wahine Māori. And therefore, of course, those soldiers on the whole never returned due to death. And so the sadness that is in there, but yeah, that is reflected through the song, and it's really cool. So her influence lives on and always will, and I am just thrilled.
So she wrote the Waiata Tautoko for both sides.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Exactly. Yes. It's very cool.
And then, in preparing for our discussion today, I read about her a little bit, and I looked at some of her old photographs and everything. And there is this this beautiful photograph where she's dressed in blue and stands in your marae, and it's a beautiful photograph. And when I looked at her face, what I felt was that here is a true mana wahine in her full power, and she's a standalone energy in her own right, and she doesn't need anybody else. Like the others can be there, yes, men folk, for example, can be around, of course, but she is the ultimate power, and that is the energy that I got looking at her photo and reading about her. What are your thoughts on that?
Indeed, absolutely. There are many layers to that photo as well, that portrait. It's so well known, and it kind of formed the entire identity, I suppose, of my upbringing, and as it was like the hero photo that was shown to me to introduce me by my grandmother to her mother. And the reverence that she had for her mother, just absolute adoration. And what's more is that this photo resides in the Waikato Museum,
Right.
and so it's very well known. And the photographer was Pākehā, and so that glare that you see, I can so feel it. It was for a project that I believe he was commissioned to do,
Right.
to undertake some portraiture of some esteemed elders from within my tribe, of course, Nanny Mete being one of them. And so I love that she was like, you know, you can just so see through her stance and through her staunchness that she was like, well, you are here on my, on my land, on my home, and
Right.
so I will stand for this portrait. But my goodness, you will get the fullness of my being and my mana. It's very beautiful, and if you look to the left of the photo, you can just see her iconic home,
Right.
and because she's standing right by where she did her white baiting, which is still there now. And then our marae, our carved meeting houses, just behind to the left, but then to the back and at the left, you can see her gardens, which were such a source of pride, and her home as well. So it's such an iconic
Right.
portrait. And I also love that you pointed out the blue. The blue is that royal blue is like the iconic color of our iwi, and
Oh.
of the kingitanga. So even in our scarves, we've got some really beautiful tartan scarves that are very iconic and worn by all of our nannies. And you'll see at formal gatherings and things, everyone will come in their scarves, and the dress code's either black or with hints and accessories of blue. So that is the extent of Nanny Mete's
Right.
survivance, if you will.
Okay, because this reminds me, te arikinui kuni ngawai honoi te po when she finished her period of mourning of her late papa, when she had that public coronation ceremony, that part of that ceremony where she gave her first speech only in Te Reo Māori. That day she was also dressed in that royal blue, right?
Yes, yes, and you see that a lot. I think even in her visit yesterday with the Prince of Wales, I recall, I believe she was in blue as well. So it's
Right.
an incredible way of clothing oneself with the mana of your ancestors and
Of your
of our
ancestors.
tribe as well.
Absolutely. So, Em-Haley, we'll come to your great granny also towards the end of our conversation when we get to the section where we need to talk about treaties, we need to talk where we get deep into Rangatiratanga. But at this point, so you said it. You said that Mite Karakia Kukutai, the Te Taniwha Waikato, she refused to engage with this thing called English. And that when I read that, I got goosebumps because I ended up speaking English not by choice. You ended up speaking English not by choice. This is a language that was forcibly imposed upon us, destroying a lot of rich linguistic heritage that we both had in our respective societies, right? And the language was imposed on my people in Sri Lanka, for example, through a lot of violence and through force. And nowadays we are supposed to be grateful for being able to speak English and navigate this very neoliberal capitalist world. So to me, being able to speak my native language and teaching my children, I have two young children, and teaching them my native language, it's a huge priority. It's very, very important. So when we think about Aotearoa, Te Reo Māori has been subjected to considerable decimation. That's the kind way to put it, mild way to put it. And today, under the present dispensation in Pepeha, New Zealand, Te Reo Māori is one of the first most important elements of Rangatiratanga to be attacked. And in this context, I ask you this question. When we think of your great-grandmother who refused to engage with English, by all accounts, when we look at her profile, we see a very cosmopolitan woman. Not that she was not open to the world, but she was really literally pissed off about the way in which her people were being treated. And it clearly comes out. So what are your thoughts on your whānua's commitment to Te Reo Māori, and when it comes to this beautiful, this very historic language, every term, every word, every syllable is so rich in meaning. What has been your relationship? I would say the relationship of your generation to of Rangatahi Māori to Te Reo Māori being like, and can you talk about the language politics that are operating sometimes in a very ridiculous way, in a very ludicrous way in Aotearoa? They bring in saying, "Oh, this signpost can't be in English and Te Reo Māori." I mean, it's ridiculous, right? It's ridiculous that they could come up with things of that nature. So do you think that coming from a background such as yours was helpful in immersing yourself in this language? And what are the challenges you see for young people to I would say, immerse themselves in the language?
Kia ora. Wow, what an incredibly layered whakaaro, and I will answer it with many layers as well. For me, I
by all means.
I, from the rich and intensive activism and outspoken nature of my great-grandmother and the many generations before us, it wasn't until my grandmother, Rangirara, that there was ever even any Pākehā even married into the family. It was literally, you'd rather go for a cousin of a cousin before you went for a Pākehā. It was very, very firm. And so I feel like within myself, it's an ancestral responsibility to ensure the continuance of Te Reo Rangatira. And furthermore, Te Mita o Waikato, my noble language, the language of chiefs, is a phrase that we use to refer to the Māori language. And then Te Mita o Waikato, the tribal dialect of my people. It is an honour to be able to speak the same language that we have spoken for generations, approximately 27, since our arrival here. And I guess in order to understand the devastating impact of this right-wing coalition government's destruction of policies and protections around our reo, it's important to understand the standing of our reo traditionally within our culture, like it's inextricably connected as a taonga tukuiho, or as a treasure to be passed down, that binds us to our many generations past. But also our reo is essential to conduct our cultural and spiritual rites. Like, it's not possible without our reo to undertake karanga, to undertake our pōwhiri, our haka, our karakia, all of these aspects that are just central to Te Reo Māori and to, you know, our belief systems. And prior to colonization, of course, we didn't have a written language like how we know what a written language is now. You know, all knowledge really was transmitted orally, aside from through carvings and art forms, through compositions and through forms of songwriting and through speech making and whakapapa, recitations of our ancestry and genealogy. And one other thing that I love is to look at the terms that we have to refer to our language. One of my favorites is ko te reo te kaia te rangatira. You know, our Māori language is the food to be devoured by chiefs. It's our chiefly language. Or tōku reo tōku oho māpihi maurea, whakakai mahirihi. You know, my language is my awakening. It's an inspiration. It's the object of my affections. And so I suppose to understand the cultural and spiritual significance of Te Reo Rangatira, and to understand the passion to which our ancestors upheld, you know, our customs, our tikanga through te reo, is to then comprehend why the actions of this government and prior governments and the Crown through, you know, our dispossession and colonization was so detrimental to our spiritual well-being and our health. And so I often think about, you know, the deep pain that my great-grandmother must have experienced, having been born and raised on our ancestral meeting grounds and having conducted her entire life in servitude to our people, and to have raised my grandmother, you know, in these tikanga, in these customs and in this language, to then be taken to the native school system and to be, sorry to be brutal, but it is the truth, and it is being, you know, perpetuated through this government now, to be taken to the native school system, to be forced to go out and fetch supplejack vine, to be woven into a whip, to be beaten until she bled and bruised for speaking the only language that she knew at home. And that it just causes irreparable damage. And for that then to, you know, effectively train her or force her into submission to not pass that on to her children. Right. But then the absolute hope and the passion that she had to ensure that that was not going to happen for me. And so I feel like that's why I would say I was primed by her to undertake that mahi that her mother did. And so, yeah, it's unfathomable. But that is why this hits so hard, these years, these decades of progress that we've made, you know, through our own kohanga reo, karakaupapa, Māori Health Authority, all of these mechanisms that exist that are by Māori for Māori, and then the little representation that was there within the Pākehā or non-Māori school systems in terms of the requirements for language teaching and for education on te tiriti. All of this, and, you know, even within school books, to being taken away in only 3 years by this government is just shocking. And so there is a lot of pain that, you know, exists because our nannies and our korauas who lived through that native school system are seeing this happen again in this world to their mokopuna. But, you know, nevertheless, we persist, and that is really what informs my work, is that I know my great-grandmother would expect nothing less than for us to absolutely ngaua te kaki o te kāwanatanga, to gnaw at the neck of the government and the Crown to ensure that protections are in place, that our mokopuna will not be punished for the crime of being Māori.
Right, exactly. And also, for our listeners and viewers, let's also remind that this is also very much a shared experience. Like, for example, in Turtle Island, they took away the babies of the rightful owners of the land, and in each indigenous nation, they would have pushed people away from the land that they inhabited, and they would have taken the children far away from their homes and put in residential schools, which were not really schools, which were actual prisons. And growing up in the central highlands of Sri Lanka, and going through this school system that these British people created, I always had the feeling that before I knew my decolonial politics, before I knew my anti-colonial politics, before I had proper notions of feminist politics and so on, I always, as a child, I would feel that no, this is like a prison, right? And it is an act of putting a little child in a prison. And in Turtle Island, the children who spoke their native language were violently beaten up, and sometimes those beatings would end in death. And the children were humiliated so much, and now people are excavating mass graves of little babies who were murdered by the Catholic Church in those residential schools. And this is a shared experience in so many parts of the world. And in Sri Lanka, I have heard of stories, Buddhist tradition, some families would be vegetarian because it's a tropical country, and people eat what surrounds them, right? So when you are fed by the ecosystem that surrounds you, I've heard stories of young children of your great grandmother's generation who would have been put in these convent schools and everything, who would be beaten up by nuns from Ireland, from other places, until the child stopped speaking their native language, until the child started eating the way they wanted the child to eat, and so on. So it's a lot of structural violence we're talking about. And the age of fascism we live in is such that those same powers, they want to reclaim the little space they have lost to the work of your tupuna, for example, to people in Te Reo Māori who have fiercely advocated for Te Reo Māori to be recognized by Deconstructing space, and so they're trying desperately to reclaim that space. So what you said, every word, everything that you said there is food for thought, and I really hope that those campaigns to protect the language, because the protecting the language is connected to so many other things right now. If you go to Aotearoa today, you have all these school uniforms. Is that something that comes from Te Reo Māori? Is that something to do with Tikanga Māori? No. It has that got to do with any of the protocols of Te Reo Māori? No. These are the school uniform and these sex segregated schools and everything. These were colonial mechanisms that they introduced to keep the local sovereign people in check, right? So to suppress the sovereign people of the land. The effort is to reinforce that same logic. So this is where I think what is happening in Aotearoa with this ACT government, this ACT coalition, and what is happening in other parts of the world, there are very strong linkages. So it is against, actually at the end of the day, it's against one big force of one big reactionary colonialist force that we are up against as well. And that one force has different manifestations. One manifestation in Aotearoa, another manifestation in the sovereign territories known as Australia, and another manifestation in what we know as the Republic of India, and so on. And you seem to be doing some great work to advocate for Te Reo Māori through your art, through your music. So you're a very talented musician. And can you tell us a little bit about your musical work so far, and about your debut album, and what have been your key inspirations, and what are you working on these days on the musical front?
Oh, kia ora. What a lovely mihi. Yes, I can't say it enough. I feel like through music, which I call artivism,
Mhm.
I am able to carry on the resistance and resilience and survivance, if you will, of my great grandmother. And so, just like her, I, through my music, try very much to weave in, you know, politics through my opinions that are, you can't mistake what I'm trying to say. For example, Bald Head about Christopher Luxon,
Mhm.
and this new wave of settler colonialism, or through Hoki Whenua Mai, Return the Land, which is about the results of obviously not only colonization, but the raupatu, which is the forced confiscation of over 1.2
Mm.
million acres of land, of my tribe's ancestral land, and when we were forced to flee into exile in the Taranaki region under the guidance of our second Māori king, Kingi Tawhio. And I do this through weaving together, I suppose, especially in my debut album, which is titled Girl in a Savage World, meant to be an intentional play on, of course, the noble savage stereotype that is still perpetuated and, you know, known in my country, with the belief that we are inherently savage and we lack, you know, benevolence and vulnerability and kindness, and it's just the whole warrior gene, awful trope. And so instead, that perhaps it is indeed the colonizers and that institution that is savage rather than us. And so in my debut record, through the songs, I'd kind of spoken to you about how I wanted to take really the sonic palette of our colonization, which is, you know, taking the Victorian instruments, you know, again, guitars, pianos, marching drums, giving that militant, cold, oppressive feel, and strings, you know, a lot of instruments that we have been made to just be so fearful of and to feel like, you know, we can't embrace classical music or things like that, you know, because of institutional racism. And so trying to
Right.
take these sounds that really, one, form the soundtrack to our disposition, yes, but also that I'm really intrigued by and think are so beautiful, but that again I've never wanted to approach by being so intimidated by those sounds, and to mix these with our, you know, traditional songwriting styles, of which I think I've nodded to some of them: mō te atea, karanga,
Mhm.
ori ori, our lullabies, haka, and also taonga pūoro Māori, so our traditional Māori instrumentation, which each one, you know, when wielded, has such symbolism, like pū tātara, which is our conch shell, which when it's blown symbolizes impending war. So obviously this serves as almost like a in replacement of a bass in bald head to show that, you know, we are going to battle against the government. And then also other sounds like porotiti, which is like a disc usually of bone or pounamu or wood that's almost like a cat's cradle, or an accordion, pulled like this, and the sound is just this remarkable ancestral soothing whir, and so I've utilized that, combined with a tongikura, which is like the prophetic dying saying of our second Māori king, Kingi Dawhiao, po tātou te wherowhero te tuarua, which is I riro whenua atu me hoki whenua mai, or as land was stolen or confiscated, so too must it be returned. And so, yes, I've just woven all of these things together with knowledge
Can you
from...
please say that again? The
sorry.
late king's statement.
Yes, of course, yes. It's a tongikura, which you hear in the first song off the record, Holy War, and it says, I riro whenua atu me hoki whenua mai, or as land was taken or confiscated, so too must it be returned.
Bless.
So that is really, what I've done with my record and in the songs, and it's just been a huge blessing to see it, be used as I intended it, which I suppose is to arm the resistance and our survivance. And to challenge those whom need challenged and to unsettle them, but also to bring such strength and our people in our fights for, the betterment of our future mokopuna and
Absolutely.
justice.
Absolutely. That's brilliant work, Em-Haley. So what are the current things you are involved in? What are your current plans on the musical front? So are you working on a new album these days, or?
Oh, well, at the moment, I'm neck deep in my masters, so I haven't been able to work on new music as much as I would like to, though there is some very exciting kaupapa, kaimui te aroaro, some very exciting projects that I have been asked to be part of since my standing at the UN. But my immediate work that is before me is actually going to Turtle Island, to Canada, and I've been invited to headline some arts festivals there with sharing the songs from my debut album, but also to conduct workshops, namely the title of which I decided my workshop would be called is The Beauty of Bilingual Songwriting for the Purposes of Indigenous Resilience and Resistance. From, of course, my perspective as not only a wahine Māori, a Māori woman, but a rangatahi Māori, a Māori youth, and also a wahine moi wahine, a Māori lesbian, and how important it is for me to be able to express myself through our ancestral language, because there's so many concepts that just cannot be conveyed through te reo pihikite, as Nanny Mete will call it, through the biscuit language. Whereas our language is te reo parawa, the bread language. It is sustenance. It is, it's not just a sweet treat with no nutrients. And so I'm enjoying that, and that's in Inuvik, which is the furthest north I will have ever gone. It's at the western gateway to the Arctic Circle, with the Indigenous community there, and they've also asked me to be on a panel for cultural appropriation versus appreciation, of which I'm very excited to quote the UNDRIP in that. And yeah, so my work is, as well as juggling my academic studies, I will be going to Calgary, Inuvik, Saskatoon, and there's a few more that are getting organized as we speak as well. So it's a huge privilege for, my record only released in September, so it's fabulous to be able to take it overseas and share the subject matter, which, as you've outlined, is although it's arguably specific and niche, being written in my dialect about our experiences, those are reflected throughout the world with our fellow Indigenous kin. So I'm looking forward to bringing some fierce wahine Māori, mana wahine toa, over in the Arctic and with our
very good. And when is this happening? When are you headed to Turtle Island?
I leave in a week and a half
Very
to
good.
rehearse with my musicians, but I will be doing this mahi in June and July.
In June and July. Okay, very good. That's very good to hear because it's going to be a beautiful initiative because there'll be a lot of transferable potential when you engage with the indigenous people of Turtle Island. Again, a people whose art, whose music were violently suppressed. There was a time when it's not long ago the British king visited Turtle Island, and it was all over the media when the indigenous people were performing a religious ceremony of some sort. The king and the queen consort were laughing at the indigenous people and their throat singing and so on. So that's symbolic of the harm that has been caused to their languages, to their music, to their art, to their culture, and also most importantly to their diverse traditions of lived experience of indigenous people, the same things they did to the Takatapu whānau in Aotearoa, to sexual gender diversities in where I come from, and to people in Turtle Island, to spirited people, people of so many different sexual orientations and so on, and this is where I think your art will be your music will speak to a lot of people, especially of the younger generation.
E mihi ana, kia ora rā. Yes, I just, just as when I was at the United Nations very recently, or when the Boardhead music video, for example, I'm white-facing Queen Victoria, who of course was in power when and ordered our, colonization. And so I really enjoy bringing this ferocity, if you will, no holds barred. I feel like, we're at a time and place worldwide, but it's so felt, I suppose, through my lived experiences here back home, where we just have nothing to lose. Our
Right?
protections to exist on our own lands as the indigenous peoples of Aotearoa are, crashing down before us. And so I am just, no, what's the word? No holds barred. I am right there just wanting to give everything that I have to bring the plight of my peoples, but also, our survivance and our strength and the generations of resistance. Because though this is happening again as a new wave right now, I'm still here after, thousands of years of us maintaining our Tino Rangatiratanga. Still,
Absolutely.
speaking to you still on the other side of the world, taking these stories and the pains and the triumphs. And so, yes, I will certainly be armed with the strength of my tupuna and the awareness that it is, more important than ever to decide which side you stand on. And I want
100%.
people to be encouraged to fight for us and be allies. And therefore, of course, for all of our kin around the world.
Oh, bless. So you brought this to a very interesting point. You just mentioned the UN. This was where I was going next. So you recently made a very powerful intervention at the UN, and it was, you could see, anybody who watches it could see the power and the mana in that statement you made. So can you tell us about your ongoing engagements with the United Nations? In what capacity do you engage with the United Nations, and what has that experience been like so far for you?
Yes, of course. So I started off with, I suppose, my awareness of the UN mechanisms through my appointment as ambassador for Oceania in the Indigenous Youth Storytellers Circle, which was an official project of the United Nations Year of Indigenous Languages, which now has extended to be a decade of Indigenous languages. And so through that position, you know, my mahi is really to try and exhort and encourage my fellow youths of Oceania, of which our voices are often muted and not heard, to share their stories through art or through essays on a platform that's by us, for us, if you will. And so through this, I was shown the opportunity to apply to be a grantee of the UN Voluntary Fund, because being again on the other side of the world and at the bottom of the white people map, it is almost impossible for me to be able to engage due to the amount of money and the reassurces that it takes to be able to leave your community and go to the other side of the world. Both obviously fiscally, financially, and spiritually into a place that historically has not been meant for us, and to go and bring the issues that we really need to address there. And so I applied, and I was one of a handful of leaders from Indigenous leaders from around the world, from the different regions, to be a grantee of this year's voluntary fund. Apparently there were over 2,000 communities that applied, and so I consider it a huge honor, but a great responsibility, for which the way that the fund operates, once they have taken a representative from one country, they're very unlikely, and they're very forward with saying that they're very unlikely to do that again for several years, so that they can try and give different opportunities to different countries. So I was a grantee, and that meant that they supported my flights there and back, and gave me, a small stipend for accommodation and costs. But the main tautoko and support really came from my fellow Māori and allies in my own community, my own hokainga. I went there, and we had a beautiful, beautiful ceremony where surrounded by, my whānau, who some of them came in from out of town, got accommodation just by our marae, just for the ceremony, and nannies came in their best clothes, and it was very beautiful. So I offered songs from my debut record, and I had my whole band there. They're all wahine, and they're all women of colour, and we performed a special concert for everyone from home. And then I told them about, my appointment as a grantee and what that meant, and everyone offered support financially, and through, of course, the giving of songs and many things. And so it was phenomenal to be able to have the tautoko of my community, and also the awareness that, again, they were just really in disbelief and awe, because it's almost unfathomable to imagine that we are able to go to the other side of the world, to the UN, and speak, before member states and government leaders, and to be able to expose the wrongdoings and ask for support and ask for better. And so it was a really moving time and ceremony, and I've received some wonderful messages from whānau throughout the journey, but also upon my return, who are aunties who are academics and in their own capacity have been involved with the UN, but never the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues, and the importance, I suppose, of the Permanent Forum as a really high-level advisory body is not missed on me. It's really the only mechanism that enables Indigenous peoples to sit alongside government organizations and to be able to speak. And so it was very amazing. And I was, proud to offer and deliver 2 interventions on different issues. The first was in the 5th meeting, and that was the meeting that was to the Special Rapporteur, Dr. Albert Barume, and MRIP, on agenda item 5D. And so I spoke with special attention to the CDAW General Recommendation 39 on the rights of Indigenous women and girls, and highlighted, of course, the disproportionately high statistics of our women and our children in incarceration, suicide, and state care, and also exposed, therefore, the despicable actions of this coalition government in de-establishing Te Aka Whai Order, which is our Māori health authority, and abandoning their incarceration reduction targets. And then my second intervention was with a focus on the government's disgraceful human rights violations and breaches upon our Te Reo Rangatiratanga, and UNDRIP, of course. And so I wrote down from one of my second intervention just the opening paragraph to share with you.
Please do. Please do.
And so I said, and I quote, the New Zealand government continues to lick the festering wounds of colonialism and dispossession with their right-wing policies which incite anti-Māori sentiment and dismantle the decades of progress we have made in recovering and strengthening our culture, language, identity, health and well-being, violating the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, and they are now moving to purge Te Tiriti protections of our people from 23 pieces of legislation which, if passed, would cause irreparable damage to our economic, social, cultural and environmental base. And then recommended, of course, that the forum urge New Zealand and all member states to honour obligations to their Indigenous peoples and the treaties that bind them, and, of course, to follow up on last year's forum's request to exhort New Zealand to recommit to Te Tiriti, and for the government and the Crown to commit to ensuring that Te Tiriti o Waitangi is embedded within the constitutional framework and arrangement of Aotearoa. So it was big mahi, but it was incredible. I was not about to feel intimidated and was surrounded by an amazing group of small but mighty of wahine Māori, academics and health practitioners and lawyers, and it was great, who stood by me as I delivered these interventions. I just wanted to be myself and be passionate, but of course fit within the very firm and strict frameworks of delivering interventions, of which I did not know how ordered it was. You really approach it like an academic piece, delivering, citing articles, delivering recommendations, all under 3 minutes.
All under 3 minutes, exactly. I was going to say that it's all time controlled and everything. And so, Em-Haley, what was your experience like with the UN, like in general? How did you feel the place? Because the UN has many issues, right? And when you look at some of the major challenges we face in terms of peace and security in this world today, we see a lot of what I would call imperialist, capitalist, white supremacist, patriarchal violence that the UN just lets happen. And the UN was actually, in fact, created to sustain the power interests of the Western powers that be, right? So in that context, it's not easy. It's never straightforward for any queer person to navigate the UN. It's not easy for any Indigenous woman to navigate the UN, because the UN was not meant for Indigenous people in the first place, right? And in that sense, what are your thoughts on navigating the UN space as a young wahine Māori? How did you feel the space? And if you were in a position of power at the UN, what kind of changes you would bring? What are your thoughts on that?
Kia ora. Yes, fabulous. I agree. You know, the UN space has not historically been made for us. In fact, it's been made to keep us out. Case in point, the UNDRIP, for those who don't know what that is, the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, which promotes and protects the rights of over 370 million of us as Indigenous peoples, you know, ensuring we can maintain self-determination, culture and identity. This was only adopted in 2007. You know, and in many countries around the world, we hadn't even been recognized, you know, as living beings, as humans. So, of course, it is a place that's, you know, wrought with tension and historical injustice, but I am armed with the saying, which is that if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. So, you know, I'm very grounded also in the many Māori remarkable leaders, again, like Dr. Moana Jackson and Wiremu Ratana, you know, who have made those invaluable contributions. And then, of course, those who are within the system and really arguably on the front line that continue to support the recognition of our Māori human rights. And of particular interest to me was, of course, the fact that both of the folks that are within these mechanisms, MRIP and the Permanent Forum, are both wahine Māori. We've got Dr. Valmain Toki, and she's the first Māori and the first New Zealander appointed by the President of the Human Rights Council to MRIP. And then, of course, the esteemed Emma Ross and Te Patu, who's not only the first Indigenous woman to be the president of the World Federation of Public Health Associations, but also is our expert member in the Permanent Forum. And so I suppose, yes, there was a sense of absolute overwhelm when I went there, you know, feeling like, oh my gosh, the responsibility, I suppose, of carrying the decades of oppression and the very real cries of my people and of my tupuna and of my peers to the UN, and knowing that change is very slow, but it is possible through recommendations and such. But to even do that, the importance of getting your interventions correct was wild. But I suppose to see, which was something I never expected or dreamed of, to be able to see myself reflected in Emma being there, representing my people and our people, was so powerful. And to also be there, like, another thing that really helped truly was that aside from the financial support that I was very much blessed and thankful to receive from my people, was being adorned in my taonga. You know, this was confiscated and banned for decades.
Right.
You know, under the Tohunga Suppression Act, just any weaving in itself, all of these things. And so to go into this space, to be who I am, to have this, you know, rich ancestry and the expectations of my peoples at home, to go there and to stand proud in my wahinetanga and my Māoritanga was so amazing. I am, I suppose, just more filled with fervor and have a ngākau whiwhita, or like a heart that is ablaze with passion to try and learn more about these mechanisms. And received when I came home, I've got an auntie, Denise Te Tihi Iwe, who is a member of the Māori Women's Welfare League, and so she shared with me how her and Prue Kapua successfully sought ECOSOC status for the league at a time where, you know, our rights as wahine were just so undermined and underrepresented, and so there is a rich history. There is so much work that needs to be done, and there was a lot of things that happened that we were very outspoken about reporting on whilst we were there, including being relegated to a more inferior room and being refused entry on the first day of the forum, alongside our chief, who was actually undertaking the opening ceremony. It was just, it's a reminder that these places are not meant for us, but nevertheless we persist, and there is a rich history of our people and of Indigenous peoples from around the world that are, at the forefront, demanding for justice and for better. So I suppose that's really what arms me. And above all, it was more just the fact that I was like, my goodness, I mean, we're so underrepresented and our voices are so not heard. And right now we're facing like the worst breaches in decades. And so to carry that with me was like, hey, that is really why I'm here, and if I can at least just have the ears and the attention,
100%.
albeit for a moment, I know that the message is very strong, and as you've seen, the repercussions have been remarkable. It has gone absolutely everywhere, and the messages from home as well, met with a lot of vitriol and anti-Māori sentiment and a lot of disgusting threats asking where I live and things like that, as you know. But the messages from my people were just profound, and feeling like, hey, we do have a seat at the table.
Seat at the table.
That does a lot just for us as we fight back home.
Absolutely, 100%. And this is the whole point, right? These UN interventions, the 3 minutes you get can have an impact on the work you do at home, and the work that other Rangatahi Māori, Paine Māori do at home. So hence the importance of that intervention. We'll come to that in a different way in a little bit. Em-Haley, the next question I wanted to ask you is a tricky one. Politics in the Kavanatanga space. So in Kavanatanga politics in Aotearoa, there have been cycles, different developments, right? So in the early 2000s, there was the case of the late Whaya Tariana Turia, who crossed the floor of Parliament, and she said, I'm done with you, to the New Zealand Labour Party. She created Te Pāti Māori and set a very important precedent. And over the last, I would say, last 2 to 3 years, we have seen in Kavanatanga politics. I'm not talking about the Rangatiratanga politics here, right? How Rangatira Māori engage with this Kavanatanga space. That's the one I'm talking about, and how Maori leaders have managed to rattle this Kavanatanga space and its standing orders and its so-called customs and everything, because it's all meant once again for a wealthy Pakeha landowning rich political class, right? That New Zealand Parliament is all about that. So we have seen with Hana Rohiti's engagements in Parliament, and with Te Pāti Māori representatives, their work in Parliament, and some of the Green Party members of Parliament as well, a lot going on, a lot of progressive voices being raised, and in fairness, I also think of legendary figures like Georgina, Fire Georgina Bayer back then, who used this space, and also when we think of Takatapui politics, Dr. Elizabeth Kerekere, whose tenure in Parliament and the previous Parliament, she tried to bring in. Elizabeth Kerekere is somebody, and big shout out to her, by the way, as both of us queer women talking about politics here. She created the Te Whana Whana Trust and did a lot of work for the Takatapu whānau in Aotearoa, and also that work carrying a lot of resonances abroad. So a lot has been going on, but we have also witnessed in the last year, especially, considerable divisions in Maori politics in the Kawanatanga space. And I always think that the powers that be, they love the indigenous people divided, right? They tried that and they keep doing that in the part of the world where I come from in South Asia. They don't want us to talk to each other. They don't want the Sri Lankans to talk to the South Indian people with whom we share a lot of ties of kinship. They don't want me to talk to you. So your issues are very specific to you, we are told, and my issues are very specific to me, I'm told. So this creating divide and rule division is a thing, and it's always been like that, how they establish their control in places like Aotearoa 150 years ago or 200 years ago, and it's happening now as well. So you have whatever force that they can use, whatever mechanism they can use. So you have a powerful party, powerful structure, 5-6 people, rangatira in their full power, pushing for change in the Kawanatanga space, and boom, all of a sudden there is a rift, and then one powerful Wahine Maori goes this way and the other people go this way, and it's very disheartening to see. It's painful. There is what's the word, there's this mamai, right, in Te Reo Māori, you say it's there's a great deal of pain one would experience witnessing that. So what are your thoughts? Because the New Zealand political space is going to a general election pretty soon. So do you see space for, how can I say that, for coalition building among Maori leaders, Rangatira Maori engaged in Kawanatanga politics? Because I'm asking this to look for your perspective as Aotearoa enters, as New Zealand enters this election year.
Kia ora. Well, firstly, I agree that the pain is so immense and heartbreaking when we see our people, at the highest level in government that and parliament chambers, which only a couple of years ago, as you would have seen, banned Rawiri because he was wearing, probably, let's be honest, a $5,000 taonga that is worth a lot more than some pathetic $20 tie. And of course also passed and sanctioned the political expression of our representatives and of our Māori parliamentarians, giving the harshest punishment and banishment that our country's ever seen. It's disgusting. And so to see our own people quarreling and being separate is heartbreaking, because it really does feed into, just like you said, exactly what this establishment wants. And furthermore, the lateral racism that, using our people, I suppose, to do the dirty work against other minority communities that have made Aotearoa home. It's very devastating. So I think on a historical note, the truth is that it's become more about, how would you say, it's become more about like personalities and people aligning with personalities as opposed to policies. And policies really are what is going to make the change, and to speak but not sway, but also give a sound opinion. I think that Auntie Tina Ngata said it the best. She wrote, "Dear angry Pākehā, Te Tiriti does not force you to be Māori. It stops the government from forcing Māori to be Pākehā." I love that. I think that's incredible. And so really, I do believe that though there are complex personalities at play, and it really does not help when, we're not presenting a united front. I do believe that our people all have the same goal, which is entrenching Te Tiriti o Waitangi, hei paenga mo te iwi Māori for the benefit of Māori, but also, of course, when Māori thrive, everyone thrives.
Everybody else thrives, yeah.
So I think, I would answer this in two ways. Firstly, through my nerdy Waikato Tainuitanga, the side of me that looks to the leadership within my tribe and the ways that we have historically and still currently bring together representatives from all iwi under the one accord to fight again against the Crown and the government is an essential way to look at what we hope for within te whare pāre mata, te whare miere, the beehive. And so, of course, our kingitanga, the Māori monarchy, was established in 1858, and that was, as a direct response to our dispossession and as a way to unite all Māori, whereas the term Māori didn't even exist prior to colonization to refer to us as peoples. We were simply just, our entire identity was our iwi, right? Our tribes. And so then we got lumped together, of course, upon colonization. And so the kingitanga, the monarchy, did exist to unite all of us against our land being taken, the genocide of our culture, our language, and our peoples against Queen Victoria. And it exists till this very day, as you know, with our 8th Māori monarch. And one thing that I really love that's very important, but that a lot of people don't realize about our kingitanga is that though it is held within my iwi, and it has been since its fruition, it really does serve to unite te iwi Māori, all of us as a whole, to safeguard, our lands, our resources. And right now we've got our Sika Māori Queen Ngā Waihono i te pō at the centre. And she herself, I wanted to touch on this because I thought you may find it interesting. She has the Te Kaumārua, which means the 12. And this is an official advisory council, if you will, for whoever the current monarch is in the kingitanga. And the membership of the Te Kaumārua includes rangatira or chiefly leaders from tribes throughout New Zealand rather than just our iwi. And so this includes members from, the Kohanga Reo movement, the Māori Women's Welfare League, Māori councils. I just think that's such an incredibly profound mechanism that exists to have representatives of our iwi, Māori, as the guiding force for our Māori monarch. Anyways, now let me move to my second point, which is how can we, in my opinion and in the opinion of, academics that I really admire, ensure this government gets out and ensure the protections for te tiriti. Well, I suppose, in my opinion, it really has to do with, obviously, if you vote left, and that would be a Te Pāti Māori Greens Labour coalition, it will get rid of the government. But that's, it'll last for however long until the next right-wing government comes back in force and seeks to, completely eradicate the treaty protections. And so the only way really to ensure that te tiriti is protected for our mokopuna, for our grandchildren, is to, make sure that you are really putting importance on voting for, at the moment, the only two parties that have committed to the constitutional protections of te tiriti, which is Te Pāti Māori and the Greens. It's still going to get this government out by voting with Labour because you need that coalition. But I feel like that's something really important to know. And so, though it's so easy to be swayed by whoever's, popularity and personality, the thing that's going to make change is really policies. And so there really is no future of Aotearoa nor us as tangata whenua with alongside our tangata tiriti cohort if we do not have protections for Te Tiriti o Waitangi. And so it's like,
Absolutely.
it's constitutional. That's sort of how I see it. So it's like, I hope that people, make informed decisions, and that everyone understands that I do believe our people want the same thing. We want the protections of our rights. It's just that, when we feed into exactly what this institution wants and we quarrel and it gets toxic, it's so damaging. And sometimes then we lose sight of what the goal really is.
What the goal really is. Yeah.
Right now is to embed Te Tiriti o Waitangi, and to ensure that the constitutional protections. And so I think that should be the guiding force for us as voters and for the establishment of any, parties. But that's just my opinion as a Rangatahi Māori.
This is
I'm
the
not
section that we need to really put in magic clips and share widely, because I hope this message reaches out the maximum people, and especially of the younger generation, about as the country enters an election year. So Em-Haley,
And I might also note that Labour has committed to repealing like a small fraction of what this government has put in place. So that really does at the moment. It is very important and crucial to ensure that when this government gets out and the next one comes in, that it does really have those parties that have committed to the constitutional protections, because otherwise the next far-right government will come in and then they'll be able to progress their goal of treaty eradication. So it's just that is really where I see that's the kingpin, I suppose.
Yeah, it's very good point. Very, very good point indeed. So, Em-Haley, this kind of brings us to the last section of our conversation. I mean, we could go on. I could go on talking to you for hours. But coming to this last section of our conversation, I'd like to bring together some of the key themes that we've been talking about so far. One big conversation is Te Reo Māori, and the other big conversation is international engagements, because when you think of the tangata whenua of Aotearoa, we are talking about an ancient people who would have sailed to different parts of the world and who would have had a certain presence in different places. And when you think of Manaki Tanga, certain very important elements of Tikanga Maori, you are talking about an international, cosmopolitan, very diplomatic kind of people, fierce warriors, but also very diplomatic, very, very caring. And Te Tiriti o Waitangi, right? This is what people seem to fail to understand, especially the treaty people as such, or in Tangata Tiriti spaces, sometimes this understanding is lacking. Te Tiriti o Waitangi, it's all about mutual respect, right? The bottom line of Te Tiriti o Waitangi is about co-governance and mutual respect. So, if you were to create a Tiriti-centric Aotearoa, you see, if I had to be Raviri and, a lot of Maori politicians who are active in the Kavanatanga space talk about this Tiriti-centric Aotearoa. Now, in practice, a Tiriti-centric Aotearoa would be this land where the Rangatiratanga space functions as a standalone power, and it has its own policies, and it takes care of the Tangata Whenua. And with Tangata Whenua being taken care of means the Whenua will be taken care of, the environment will be better taken care of, the waterways will be better taken care of. And then the Kavanatanga space can operate in its own way, and for that they'll have to give up a lot of power, give up their oppressive ways of suppressing people, destroying people's livelihoods, destroying people's lives, and imposing themselves on others. So now, if you take the world today, if you think about the land that is often referred to as Australia, if you think about quite a few of the indigenous territories of Turtle Island, if you think about the indigenous communities within inverted commas, very often in the media, referred to as tribal communities in South Asia, especially in the Indian subcontinent. In general, there is a consensus that there is a need for treaties. So treaties, like in Turtle Island, the treaty would be between ex-Indigenous community or territory with the Dominion of Canada. And in Australia, it would be the same thing. So X or Y community in relation to the Commonwealth of Australia, sharing or the treaty clearly defining the rights that are assigned to the Indigenous community. So I have been thinking quite a lot about this concept of a Tiriti-centric Aotearoa and the necessity of reinforcing Te Tiriti, right? So this is also a reason why, in my understanding, that a certain segment of the politics of Pakeha, New Zealand, that segment is hell-bent on destroying Te Tiriti o Waitangi because it gives a basis. Like in all those other countries I mentioned, people talk about treaties, but it's very rare to find a precedent, like a basis to have that conversation on. So you have to build the basis. And people like Senator Lydia Thorpe, who we had the great pleasure of having a conversation in Sisterhood in Politics, people like Lydia Thorpe, a lot of other Indigenous politicians in different parts of the world try to have these conversations. But in Aotearoa, the advantage is, here's a document that clearly says how the place should be governed. And since the day it was signed, the Kawanatanga space hasn't respected its treaty obligations. Tangata Whenua they've literally had to drag the Kawanatanga space and literally had to force the little bits and pieces of treaty protections that have been achieved, right? And it's been a constant struggle, and it should not be a struggle. So in a Tiriti-centric Aotearoa, you would have a structure where we could think of a different type of international engagement for Tangata Whenua, right? Instead of the UN, why not the non-aligned movement, which was a very strong movement of global south or global majority states that got together. And so over the last 30-40 years, a lot has been done to destroy the non-aligned movement. And my own country, Sri Lanka, Mrs. Bandaranaike, Sirima Bandaranaike, the first woman to become a prime minister in the world, she was a leading proponent of the non-aligned movement back in the 1970s. So I have a lot of affection to the non-aligned movement. And I think of a world, sometimes I like to imagine a world where the non-aligned movement, instead of the UN, would be in a stronger position, bringing all the global majority people, the indigenous people together, and it would function it would function with the same, I would say, influence that the UN has, but under our own terms, right? Terms such as Manaki Tanga, terms such as, in ancient diplomatic traditions that our people would have had, right? Not things that are being imposed upon us. And in the UN, there's a lot of ableism as well, right? Unless you have the right kind of analytical skills, the right kind of Western epistemology, Western academic background, Western language skills, there's no chance at the UN. So why not structure of our own? So I keep dreaming of these things. And then in Aotearoa, there is this possibility of a Tiriti-centric land where, like you said it very well, that this is like the Kawanatanga politics, it's like musical chairs, right? So we may advocate like people like Tanya in the Green Party and quite a lot of people in the Green Party, Chloe and everyone. They're trying their best to develop their movement, and everybody else in Te Pati Maori, and in general, there's a lot going on. There's a consensus that this ACT government has to go at the next general election. But what about 3-4 years down the line? So it's a musical chair situation that they have created to deliberately create a situation where in Te Reo Māori, people are just running after the Kawanatanga space. People are asking for crumbs, and you're wasting your time asking for crumbs. And what if we had a tiriti-centric Aotearoa around Kingitanga or around whatever structure? And Te Arikinui has created this advisory board that you're talking about. Why not structures like that? And so the Queen is also very keen about, she talks about Maori economics, for example, right? And building those structures, if within the Rangatiratanga space, if there were all those structures, even to issue a passport or whatever it is, then there is no need to run behind the Kawanatanga space, right? When it comes to Te Reo Māori or anything else. So this is the challenge. So there is a template for this, and it is, I would like to think that it is a possibility, and the people in power know that it is a possibility, and it is a promise that has been signed in 1840. That is why they want to get rid of it. So when we think of a Tiriti-centric Aotearoa, what are your thoughts on the necessity of our end goal, right? Today you go to the UN and you do this work. Tomorrow we will all try to topple the ACT government, and we'll try to survive, right? Because like Audre Lorde said, we have to survive in the dragon's teeth, right? We can't live in a utopia. So we have to deal with whatever we're up against. But in the long run, what if we were able to advocate for a truly Tiriti-centric Aotearoa where the Tangata Whenua would have their own standalone power base without having to convince this intransigent Kawanatanga space, and without having the headache of dealing with it all the time for every basic thing, right? And would that not be the end goal we should be advocating for? So that is my final question for you.
Kia ora. Indeed. I mean, thank you so much, firstly, for delving into Te Tiriti o Waitangi. It is obviously a very much contested, but also a topic that many are ignorant on, though it is, you know, the formative document and an agreement between Māori and the Crown that at its heart, though, you know, it goes obviously very deep and cuts hard with the two different versions, one of which is a direct violation of Te Tiriti o Waitangi. Anyhow, at its heart, it really does exactly what you've pointed out, which is that it states that Māori, we are free and protected to govern ourselves, to maintain our Tino Rangatiratanga, our self-sovereignty, to maintain our, you know, manaakitanga, and to just be Māori, right? To maintain our land, our resources, our language, our culture, and that the Crown would govern its own people, non-Māori. So, yes, I agree. I think that for starters, it would be great to be able to see, and I was speaking to Emma Wilson Tepatu, our forum member, whilst at the UN, you know, about the de-establishment of Te Aka Whaiora, the Māori Health Authority, which was so profound because it really was for Māori and by Māori, you know, enabling us to have that Tino Rangatiratanga. That being taken down was just devastating. And so anyways, about how, you know, let's just start off in the future to look at re-establishing these things so that we do have organizations and mechanisms that, again, honor what is in Te Tiriti, which is that we can govern ourselves like we have for hundreds of years successfully, and that are really, you know, matriarch-led, if you will, because as we were speaking about, mana wahine, which you could view as Māori feminism, right? The belief in the intrinsic spiritual power and authority of us as wahine, really governs our whakaaro as a whole, right? Because if you look into our spirituality, like the very land. We call ourselves tangata whenua, right? Peoples of the land. However, whenua also means placenta. You know, we are the placenta peoples. The land is everything to us. The land is Papatuandaku, our primordial earth mother. And we, as tangata, obviously creation stories and pūrākau vary, but the one that I love, which Ngahuia Murphy references in a lot of her work, is, you know, that we were formed out of the menstrual soaked sands of Kurawaka, which is at the vulva of Papatuanuku. And so all I'm trying to say is that, you know, I referenced this in my article as well. Wahine Māori, our tūpuna wahine, successfully upheld the rangatiratanga of our society, of Māori society, for you know, at least 27 generations. And so we will continue to do that. We just, you know, the support systems need to be in place financially and without the constant burden, as we were speaking about, of the Pākehā government undoing all of the frameworks that we have put in place very intentionally, you know, to enable us to continue what we're best at, which is looking after our own people. And so I do hope that in the near future, in the short term at least, we can re-establish te ako whai ora. I'm under, at the moment, in my master's studies, under a very incredible professor, Tracy McIntosh, who's a well-known prison abolitionist. There's just endless inspiration and aspiration that I'm seeing. I just believe if we can have more freedoms to be able to, one, re-establish what's been taken down, and are able to imagine a world where, you know, we've already got kohanga reo kura papa and wharekura, in which our children are able to be completely immersed in their language and their culture, and what's more, graduate with you know, what this country views as being university entrance level qualifications, the exact same qualifications as what their non-Māori counterparts are able to get in the NZ school system. But if we can see, you know, that honoured and protected, our health protected, our language protected for starters. Right now the government, sorry, I could go on and on, but, you know, they've removed Reo Māori from our early reader children's books. They're removing it from the elementary school curriculum, including education on Te Tiriti. So all of these things, all we're wanting is just the ability to not be criminalized and punished for being Māori, and to be able to really enact what was intended originally, that we're able to look after and decide for what is best for our people. And to look at the next 7 generations and make,
Exactly.
as it is called, mokopuna decisions.
Kupuna decisions.
Yeah.
Oh, blessed. That's a beautiful, beautiful way of putting it. And you encapsulated the challenges and the hopes at hand very, very well. And also when you talked about the whenua as placenta, I'm also reminded of the fact that, you know, in South Asian spiritual traditions, in the tantric tradition, for example, the earth is always seen as a feminine energy. So the earth is a deity, Bhu Devi, the earth deity as such, the earth goddess as such. So these are very much shared spiritual perspectives as well, and gives us a basis to truly develop anti-colonial, decolonial work, and some of the work that we have to do is also about thinking beyond, like we have to survive in the dragon's teeth, but also think beyond what's there outside the dragon's teeth, and that it is possible to go there, especially through our collective coalitions and the collective structures that we build, because that's the only way to protect the environment. That is the only way to protect the whenua. That is the only way to protect the whenua, as in
Well, right? Like we're seeing so much knowledge sharing where our, for example, we are hosting, my tribe is hosting for the first time the World Indigenous Suicide Prevention Conference.
very good.
And so this is, we're able to welcome our Indigenous relatives from all over the world under one accord, which obviously is to address one of the devastating symptoms of colonization that still affects
Absolutely.
and where our people are overrepresented. There's so much knowledge sharing in that respect. There's numerous accounts that's ongoing to this very day of our people, going to North America and to Indigenous communities there and comparing systems regarding language revitalization, full immersion schooling, and vice versa. I think that is something they can never take away from us, is
Never.
that we've been actively, resisting. And regardless of what policies are in place, we will still keep pressing on. But for us to be, under one accord with our Indigenous kin and relatives around the world, because, as one of us rises, it just enables all of us to as well. And we may
Yes,
be,
exactly.
right now focusing on dead citizenship protections, language protections, elsewhere in the world it's in other areas. And so I just feel like there's a rising, I suppose, energy and connection between our peoples, and that will continue so that we can guide each other into the future and continue the work of our tupuna, of our.
Absolutely, 100%. Em-Haley, this has been such a beautiful conversation, such an enriching conversation. You really filled my cup. And thank you very much for joining us today. And it's been a great pleasure. And to conclude, I would say all the very best with your trip to Turtle Island, and it's something to look forward to. And I will also be in Turtle Island for a bit during that time in June, and it will be a pleasure to follow the work that you'll be doing there. And all the best with your the academic work as well. And it's a great pleasure to have created this space to share. Sorry, I'll start again. It's a great pleasure to have shared space with you and to have been able to create this space for us to connect. And thank you very much for accepting our invitation.
Oh, e mihi ana ki a koe, e kore e mimiti aku mihi. My acknowledgements and gratitude shall never dry up towards you, and
Oh,
it's
bless.
such a blessing to be able to join I raro I te whakaaro kotahi miki under the one accord, and bringing together our ancestry, our culture, and our shared resilience. It's just fabulous. And so, may you continue to mahi a te mahi hei whainga mō te iwi, as Princess Te Puia said, which is continue to do whatever is necessary for the benefit of one's people.
Oh, thank you very much.